Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for virtually being here today. I'm just going to give it a minute so that everyone who wants to has a chance to join us. In the meantime, you can find the rhetorical analysis prompt that we'll be working with today in the link on this slide or in the video description. So we'll just give it 1 minute to let everybody join us and then we will get started. We'll just give it a couple of more seconds here. Again, if you're just joining us, you can find the prompt we're working with today. It's a rhetorical analysis prompt in the link on this slide or in the video description. Just going to give it a couple of more seconds here to make sure everyone who wants to has a chance to join in, and then we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and start. So I am Dawn Knight. I am an English teacher at Westfield High School in a city just north of Indianapolis. And we're going to start today by going over the AP exam practice from yesterday. Even if you weren't able to do that lesson yesterday, this will still be beneficial to you. So if you want to join us. Yesterday, we reviewed traits of good and great conclusions. If you look at the slide here, a good conclusion will be just a couple of sentences and summarize the essay, whereas a great conclusion will be approximately 3 to 5 sentences, and it'll go beyond just summary. Although it'll do that, it will also include at least one of the following things: getting to the larger significance or implications of the issue, looking at a broader context, making connections, explaining implications. It'll include maybe a compelling image or connect back to the introduction. So let's take a look at your assignment. You are asked to read this sample conclusion and determine which techniques the student uses to make a great conclusion. So let's just look at it together. When thinking of presidents, one often envisions a stoic man standing in front of a podium, seriously sharing a grave message about the current state of affairs or trying to inspire the country after a tragedy. It is rare we envision a man making jokes after an assassination attempt or being described as dear friend. In her eulogy for Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher highlights the latter image as a way to offer condolences to those grieving his passing. By highlighting his character as a man and his presidential prowess, Thatcher eases the grief of the mourners and reminds them of the positive traits that made him such an essential part of American history. That a great president isn't just one who carries out policy, but is also one who lives a relatable and honest life. All right, so let's look at what made this great. So first of all, you may have decided that the student does summarize the essay. So if you look in that green highlighted area there, you'll see where there's some summary. You'll also see some of the larger significance in multiple places, but especially at the end when describing what is needed to be a great president. And then there's a compelling image at the very beginning with the stoic man standing in front of a podium that establishes imagery and helps the reader picture a stereotypical president. So those are some of the things that this particular person did to make this a great conclusion rather than just a mere summary. Okay, today we're going to be working on analyzing line of reasoning in a rhetorical analysis passage. And in order to do that, we're going to take a quick review of the rhetorical situation, looking at shifts in tone and what line of reasoning is. And then we'll apply that to a rhetorical analysis passage. So here's what you need to know. First of all, we've talked about the rhetorical situation numerous times over some different lessons, but just a quick review of what that is. We look at the exigence or why, what prompted the message to be spoken or written. and the purpose, why the speaker is conveying a message, the audience, who the speaker is writing or speaking to, context, the circumstances surrounding the situation, the writer who's doing the writing, and then the message, what they want the audience to think or to know. And it's really important to understand all of these because the writer considers these when they make their choices about what they want to include and how they want to include it. There are a couple of other ways to think about the rhetorical situation that you might be more familiar with. So I wanted to go through those really quickly, just so maybe it's something more familiar to you. So another way to think about this is through the rhetorical triangle, audience and purpose, and the interrelation. Those are all important. And then why they're writing this as the acronym SOAPSTONE. Going deeper into the rhetorical situation. So this is an acronym that's audience, purpose, speaker. And so it's important to understand that different tone than someone who's trying to persuade someone disagrees with them to change their mind. Inspirational or even sarcastic or hostile. This is regarding the line of reasoning, which is what we're going to talk about based on that rhetorical situation. The things that some of the choices look like, you can see here some of, and these are just some of the ways that a writer might choose to organize a piece. And sometimes it's a combination of these things, but they might do it in a sequence or chronologically. It might be description, they might do cause and effect or comparison and contrast. They might look at problem solutions or a variety of problem solutions. um, it might be based on order of importance from most important to least or least important to most. It could also just be logically by topics and claims, or like I said, a combination of all of these. And that's why that rhetorical situation is so important, because we need to know our audience and our purpose in order to determine the best way to figure out our line of reasoning. So to analyze a line of reasoning in a rhetorical analysis essay, sorry, we're getting some technical issues here. All right, let's keep going and see if this works.
Looking good, Don.
Okay, great. All right. Sorry about that. So to analyze the line of reasoning in a rhetorical analysis essay, you might want to do the following. Look for the main idea and argument, look for claims they're making, look for evidence that they use. Also look for shifts, especially in tone. And you'll notice those when you see them, that there'll be typically some kind of a change in either the pattern or the way that they're conveying information or in their tone. And then look for patterns that emerge. So that's one of the things that you want to do when you analyze the prompt. So let's try that with this particular prompt. We're going to read it together first, and then I'm going to give you an activity to do on your own. So this is from the 2008 rhetorical analysis essay. It's from a passage called America Needs Its Nerds by Leonard Friedman. You're going to write in an essay in which you analyze how Friedman develops his argument. Sorry, I'm just double checking to make sure we're not still having issues. Okay. There is something very wrong with the system of values in a society that is only derogatory terms like nerd and geek for the intellectually curious and academically serious. A geek, according to Webster's New World Dictionary, is a street performer who shocks the public by biting off heads of live chickens. It is a telling fact about our language and our culture that someone dedicated to pursuit of knowledge is compared to a freak biting the head off a live chicken. Even at a prestigious academic institution like Harvard, anti intellectualism is rampant. Many students are ashamed to admit, even to their friends, how much they study. Although most students try to keep up their grades, there is a minority of undergraduates for whom pursuing knowledge is the top priority during their years at Harvard. Nerds are ostracized while athletes are idolized. The same thing happens in US elementary and high schools. Children who prefer to read books rather than play football, prefer to build modeled airplanes rather than get wasted at parties with their classmates, become social outcasts. Ostracized for their intelligence and refusal to conform to today's society or to society's anti intellectual values, many are deprived of a chance to learn adequate social skills and acquire good communication tools. Enough is enough. Nerds and geeks must stop being ashamed of who they are. It is high time to face the persecutors who haunt the bright kid with thick glasses from kindergarten to the grave. For America's sake, the anti intellectual values that pervade our society must be fought. There are very few countries in the world where anti intellectualism runs as high in popular culture as it does in the US. In most industrialized nations, not least of all our economic rivals in East Asia, a kid who studies hard is lauded and held up as an example to other students. In many parts of the world, university professorships are the most prestigious and materially rewarding positions, but not in America, where the average professional ball players are much more respected and better paid than faculty members at the best universities. How can a country where typical parents are ashamed of their daughter studying mathematics instead of going dancing, or of their son reading Weber while his friends play baseball, be expected to compete in the technology race with Japan or remain a leading political and cultural force in Europe? How long can America remain a world class power if we constantly emphasize social skills and physical prowess over academic achievement and intellectual ability? Okay, so I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. Actually, I'm not going to. I'm going to have you pause and give yourself about 7 minutes so that we can move on together here. Um, and I want you to take about 7 minutes because that's about how much time you would take to annotate the passage during the exam. So we want to try to emulate that and practice that. But as you're looking at it and annotating it, you should be looking for rhetorical situation, but also what you think the main idea or argument is, claims you find, evidence that's used, shifts that you notice, or any other organizational patterns. So if you want to go ahead and pause here and take about 7 minutes to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and move on, and you can move on as soon as you're ready. I'm going to illustrate what you might have annotated regarding the rhetorical situation. I'm using the SOAPSTONE acronym here just to give you an idea of how that might have worked. You probably would have annotated for some of these things in the prompt itself. So the subject you may have noticed seems to be about America's attitude toward intellectualism, or that it has an anti-intellectual um, aura going on. The occasion was that this was in 1990 in a newspaper, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot more that we knew about that. The audience is Americans, but there's also at one point he actually talks specifically to nerds in quotes. And then his purpose is to persuade Americans to fight anti intellectualism. The speaker is Friedman, and he seems to be an intellectual. And then finally, the tone, it seemed to be a little different at the beginning, where it was kind of informative, but a little frustrated. And at the end, more urgent, critical, forceful. So you may have picked up on a few of those things. Let's look at some of the other patterns and things that may have emerged. This will just give you an idea of what you may have annotated since I can't see yours. But I noticed a couple of different places where there were claims and examples. I did notice a shift at the bottom of that first column with the enough is enough. It's one very short, abrupt sentence that's also its own paragraph. And then after that, there seems to be another topic and claim with examples. I think I found what was the purpose and argument. So your analysis might look a little bit different, but you probably had some of the same things I did here. But let's look at what all of this means. First, let's think about what patterns emerged and what we noticed. So, in the first half, he talks about the problem. There's a problem with anti intellectualism, and he gives examples and evidence for support. Then we talked about that shift already. Enough is enough. And there's a shift from that into the second half of the essay, where he compares the US to other countries. And here again, there are examples and evidence for support. The message itself isn't revealed until the end with the rhetorical questions. When he says the US can't compete against other countries or remain a world power if it doesn't stop emphasizing athleticism over intellect. And then finally, if we think about what those patterns mean, there seems to be a very logical claims and evidence as far as the line of reasoning goes, but also comparison and contrast in the second half of the essay between the US and other countries, and even some cause and effect. That if we don't stop this, the effect is going to be that the United States isn't able to continue to compete. Um, so now we need to talk about what that means in the rhetorical analysis essay. So to put this into an analysis, when you're thinking about the essay itself, you need to think about the patterns and the situation, the rhetorical situation. So were those patterns effective in conveying that particular message to that particular audience? Did it help convey the message? And if so, how was it effective? So let's do another activity. I want you to think about the rhetorical situation and whether you think Friedman's message was effective. Explain why or why not, using specific examples from the essay to illustrate why you think it would have appealed to a certain audience or not, to this particular audience or not. So pause the feed here and take 5 or 10 minutes, however much time you need, to answer the questions. Is Friedman's organization effective in conveying his message to his audience, and why or why not, with examples? You can just jot down like a bullet pointed list. You don't have to write this out. You can freeze here to do that and then just hit play again whenever you're ready to move on with us. And since I can't see yours, we'll look at my notes again. It's okay if you had something different, even if you think it was ineffective, as long as you can support that with specific evidence. But let's look at what I found here. So, the first half of the essay, Friedman effectively uses a logical pattern of claim and evidence to illustrate that there's a problem with anti intellectualism. And I found a couple of examples that really illustrate that. He compared an intellectual to someone who bites the head off of a live chicken. And that image was a pretty powerful image to show the extreme, how extreme it is to look at an intellectual that way. Then he uses Harvard as an example. And I think that's effective because the audience would know this as one of the top universities in the country. And so that idea that if intellectuals are ostracized there, there clearly is a problem. So I think that that very logical organization there made it pretty clear to an American audience by using Harvard and using that stark image. The abrupt shift is also pretty effective just because it's its own paragraph and three short words that really kind of signal something's changing here, and sets up that more forceful, urgent tone. The second half of the essay, Friedman effectively compares the US to other countries through claims and evidence again. But here he's comparing. So, one example, he compares the students in the US to students in East Asia, especially with the words economic rivals, and illustrates the danger of anti intellectualism to the US economy and to its position as a world power. And I think this would be effective in appealing to the audience's fear of falling behind other world powers economically. And then the second example, the comparison of the treatment of professors in other countries to those in the US, again shows that the US is behind global rivals. And that would appeal to patriotism as well. We want to be the best. We want to um, the American audience would want to be the best. And so that would appeal to that patriotism. And notice the use of baseball there as well. This is America's favorite pastime. So, again, knowing that rhetorical situation and the audience that he's speaking to. So, I think some of those things would be good evidence that this line of reasoning would be pretty effective. Okay, so today we reviewed the rhetorical situation and how it relates to the line of reasoning. Then we applied this to a rhetorical analysis passage to determine the effectiveness of the speaker's choice. And that brings us to today's AP exam practice. So you can find this exam practice in the resources link in the video description. You're going to read another rhetorical analysis passage. And again, I want you to practice that timed situation. So try to do this in the time that is suggested. You'll read and study the prompt and annotate the passage for rhetorical situation and patterns in organization. So what we just did, you're looking for those patterns. So take the time about 7 minutes when you get to that analysis where you're just working on analyzing the passage. And we'll talk about that at the beginning of tomorrow's lesson. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Just a reminder to take care of yourselves, stay active, and stay healthy. See you tomorrow. Thank you.